Welcome to the Friday afternoon webinar here on Sex and Healing Relationship. I'm Debbie McRae. I am a licensed professional counselor and a CSAT therapist in Mesa, Arizona, where my practice is working with sex addicts, those struggling with sexual compulsive behaviors, with betrayed partners, and in helping couple heal from betrayal and creating connection within couples as well. And today I bring to you again things that show up in my office because I think it is very applicable to what a lot of couples are dealing with. So I want to share with you today, we're going to talk about formal therapeutic disclosure. I have done a number of them recently. And as I've held a number of different therapeutic disclosures, I'm learning along the way what helps to make a successful formal therapeutic disclosure. Unfortunately, what shows up in my office are several situations. One of them is the betrayed partner who's just learned about the addict partner's betrayal. There's been discovery disclosure, and they come in, and it's just been maybe a few weeks, and they want a disclosure immediately while they're very highly dysregulated. And of course, they're very, very disappointed when I say that we've got to slow it down a little bit because too soon would be too traumatic. Another situation that I've dealt with is the betrayed partner who comes in after years of that trickle down disclosures or the interrogation they've done where they've pulled information out little by little by little. And as a result, every time they get dysregulated, then they get dysregulated again. And so they're wanting to do something differently. The third situation is the betrayed partner who comes in and they've had a disclosure go terribly wrong in a therapist's office who doesn't understand how to do the proper steps to a formal therapeutic disclosure. And as a result, there's been added trauma to their betrayal experience. And I know that the betrayed partner, they really want to get that disclosure sooner than later, but we have to slow it down. So today we're going to talk about how we can make it more partner-centered, make it partner-sensitive, how we can do it with the right guidelines. And I'm going to give you lots of ideas and tools. We're also going to talk about what if you didn't have therapeutic disclosure? How do I process without it? So I'm going to give you some ideas on that. Like I said, the best type of formal therapeutic disclosure is one that's done by qualified therapists. So it's very guided. There's steps that we take in getting you prepared in actually doing the formal therapeutic disclosure in session, as well as steps we take afterwards. We know that the betrayed partner has already traumatized as a result of their partners acting out. The last thing we want to do is re-traumatize them by taking them through a disclosure that creates even more trauma. It is a very, very hard experience. The goal is that we want to expedite the healing for the betrayed partner as well as the addict partner. We want to repair the relationship. We want to repair the connection. So it's really important that we do it right. Initially, a betrayed partner is in that fight, flight, freeze state all the time. And so there's all this emotion. So we've got to get the betrayed partner out of crisis, get them a little more regulated, get them the skills and tools that they can use and utilize during disclosure before we move them into the actual formal therapeutic disclosure process, which takes about 3 to 6 months. Very, very frustrating. In the meantime, it doesn't mean that we're just going to do nothing. We're really busy working on understanding what you're experiencing, understanding your story, putting together and preparing for the disclosure. And it does take time. A lot of times betrayed partners come in believing that once I have disclosure, then I'm going to do better. Everything's done and over with. We can move on. Really, to have a formal therapeutic disclosure be effective, it's not just the disclosure itself. There's actually 3 parts to it that make this process healing. The first part is the actual disclosure itself, which takes a lot of preparation. The next section is working with your therapist. The betrayed partner will put together an impact letter. So you're processing emotions and feelings and in regards to what you've heard and the impact it's had on you in so many different dimensions. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's that restitution letter that the addict partner will put together and share. after he's or she has heard the impact letter from the betrayed partner. So it's a process. It's not just the disclosure itself where I'm getting all the data and the information. It's really important, though, before we go through those steps, that we have the proper support system in place, that we have a window of tolerance that is wide enough so that the betrayed partner can sit and hear really hard things. Self-care plans have to be put in place for both the addict partner and the betrayed partner weeks leading up to the formal therapeutic disclosure. And like I said, without this three-step process, we likely are going to do more damage than good. So it's really important that you find a therapist who has done therapeutic disclosures. They're trained in it. They know what they're doing. CSAT therapists are one of them who have been trained specially in how to do this. So let's talk about, how do you prepare before you get to disclosure? What are some of the pre-disclosure things you need to do? Because these are extremely important. First of all, the betrayed partner needs to understand what they need to get out of the formal therapeutic disclosure. Most often it's information. Sometimes it's, can I stay in this relationship? Now, when a situation like that comes along, one of the things I do as a therapist with my client is we talk about, this therapeutic disclosure is something that will help you decide your future. What are my next steps? But in doing that, I would like them to take at least 6 months post-disclosure, if not a year, depending on how long they've been in therapy, to really sit in it, process everything before they make their decision. I don't want to do disclosure and immediately that individual decides, I'm done with the relationship. We've got to process through the trauma. We've got to work through the impact and all of that first, okay? You've got to schedule the disclosure. Believe it or not, that can take a couple of months because you're trying to coordinate the addict partner writing their narrative, and that takes several sessions. They've got to also do their pre-planning. They've got to get their self-care plan in place, and then we've got to get therapist schedules coordinated. I've done another webinar on therapeutic disclosure. You can go watch it, and it kind of talks about the details of a therapeutic disclosure. But in that time, you as a betrayed partner will also be compiling questions. They've got to be appropriate. Your therapist will guide you on that. I make my clients go through their questions 3 times. So we do the rough draft, we revise, and then we do one last check before we send it off to the addict partner's therapist so that they can review all the questions together. You've got to identify your self-care plan. So the weeks leading up to the disclosure, you need to have scheduled appointments with your therapist. You need to make sure you're attending support meetings so you've got your support people around you. If you don't have a support group, then identify people that you're going to be turning to because you're going to need them along the way. You need to have an eating plan, a sleeping plan. You need to make sure that you're doing your dailies, that your self-care is a really important part of that. So we've got to get into that good routine, that recovery healing routine. The day of disclosure, you've got to have a very set plan. So I will tell my clients, okay, I want to know what you're going to do a week before disclosure, the week of disclosure, the day of disclosure. And so I will have them talk me through, I'm going to wake up that morning. And of course, we recommend that you take separate vehicles to the appointment, you and the addict partner. It's better that you drive separately. My recommendation is that you put your support people on alert that today is the day I'm doing disclosure. Some people will talk to their support people prior to coming in. They may have identified some grounding exercises they're going to do, whether it's a meditation, whether they're going to do 5 senses, whether they're just going to do some breathing. I recommend they wear comfortable clothes, that they bring in anything they need. They might want to put together a self-calming kit. So they might have a packet of things in there that appeal to the 5 senses. So I've had somebody in disclosure actually holding kind of sensory putty and holding on to it. I've had some people bring in essential oils. Some people will bring in chocolate or something sour. I have even done disclosures on Zoom where we've had all of us joining on Zoom. And in that case, I spend a lot of extra time with the betrayed partner in, okay, let's set up your environment. What's it going to look like? Let's decide what's going to be there. Will you have a blanket, comfortable clothes? I want something to drink there. What are some of the tools you're going to have to help you if you get dysregulated that we can use to get you regulated? Because we want you to feel comfortable even though that sounds kind of like ironic, but we want you to be as comfortable as possible in a very, very stressful setting. So it's very, very important that you plan ahead as to what am I going to take into session? What am I going to wear to session? Right. And as I'm getting there, how am I going to do it so that I feel supported? It's really important prior to going into disclosure that you put together with the addict partner what we call your safety net boundaries. So these are the things that are going to happen post formal therapeutic disclosure. So what is the safety plan? So it's things like I just mentioned, driving together. I mean, separately, not together. It's going to be the housing situation. Who's going to sleep where the day after disclosure, maybe even, 2 nights after disclosure? Am I going to go to a hotel as the betrayed partner? Am I going to go home? Who's going to take care of children if there's children? Do we have them go to grandma and grandpa's? Do we get a babysitter? What are the touch and the sex boundaries post formal therapeutic disclosure? How are we going to communicate with each other? Are we going to text? Are we going to email? Are we going to talk on the phone? Where are we at on that? How are we going to communicate when it's time to come back together? Where are we going to come back together? Are we going to do that at home? Maybe at the kitchen table we sit down? Are we going to meet and have something to eat? Maybe at a restaurant first? So there's all those things to think through. If you have work, am I going to schedule my formal therapeutic disclosure so it doesn't interfere with my work schedule? Maybe I do it on a Friday so I can take the day off and then I have the weekend for recovery. It's very important to think of that. Another thing is part of my safety net boundary is I have to have an appointment already put in place with my therapist. So as soon as disclosure is over, I know that I'm going to meet with my therapist. I like to meet with clients within a day or two, so that we can debrief and check in and make sure we're on track because things are going to come up. What kind of recovery activities are you going to do after you leave disclosure? Are you going to go meet people? I had one client who said, I know I'm going to be really sad and want to cry. I've got some really supportive friends where they identified a movie that felt safe to go to. And she said, I could sit in a dark theater and just cry and nobody would notice. And I knew my friends were around me. Or I might go meet people from my group and they might show up for me. I had some of my group members actually have a sleepover one night to support somebody after their formal therapeutic disclosure. And they were there for that person every step of the way. And it was awesome to hear all the ways they supported her when they all spent the night together after that she had disclosure that day. So really think about what is going to make me feel good and help me stay grounded right afterwards. I always suggest you go do something, whether it is a pedicure or it's getting your nails done or it is meeting with people to visit with, doing something and having a plan really helps you to stay regulated. Emergencies. What if an emergency comes up? What if all of a sudden one of the kids gets sick? Do I have a backup plan? Or what if all of a sudden I start to feel under the weather? How am I going to support my physical body? So maybe anticipate a little bit some of the things that could come up after you finish with disclosure. Then during the formal therapeutic disclosure, we've got to let comfort and safety be your guide. It's really important because it's impossible to know in advance, how what you hear is going to affect you. And so it's important that, like I said, you take things in with you that will help you if you become dysregulated. One of the things that we work on is to make sure that the physical distance feels safe for the betrayed partner. And so we go in and we set the room up and we check the distance. And does that feel comfortable? So that as you're doing disclosure and you're making eye contact, this feels safe to me. Another thing is we set up at the very beginning of disclosure the intention of why we're in disclosure, which is we're trying to rebuild trust. We're sharing the truth. We're doing that as we're trying to stay grounded. It's going to challenge us. Shame is going to come up and we're going to sit and hear hard things. But as we sit and hear hard things, it's okay to ask for time out. It's okay to take breaks. Another thing that's very helpful is to know the exact steps that we're going to take in that formal therapeutic disclosure. So betrayed partners are always, I always talk it through with them. We're going to come together, you and we're going to make sure you're ready for disclosure. Then we're going to invite your partner in for disclosure. We're going to then do a little bit of talking and set the stage. going right into the disclosure. So you're going to hear that disclosure. At any time you need to, you could ask to take a pause, a break. If you need to ask a clarifying question, right? We kind of let you know what to expect. I like to take a break after we have done the actual reading of the disclosure, so I can debrief with my client. We kind of see if all the questions were answered. Did new questions come up? And then we come back together and questions are asked. Then we talk about what the plan is moving forward, with both of them, the couple in the room together. Okay, what are the next steps? How are you taking care of yourself? What is the plan moving forward? And then the addict partner and his therapist or her therapist will leave the room, and then I debrief and ground my client. So if you know those are the steps, you know what to expect. It's so helpful in feeling comfortable and safe in the actual disclosure itself. Taking in your tools that will help you regulate, really important. On rare occasions, if disclosure becomes too much, it's okay for disclosure to take place over a couple of sessions, especially if emotional dysregulation is a concern. Now, I want to just share with you a little note here. One of the things that I do with my clients when we're doing a formal therapeutic disclosure is I always am working with the other therapist because I want to coordinate. I want to make sure this goes well. And one of the things I always ask is my client going to hear anything significantly new or something that's going to be extremely difficult to hear? Because then I like to go back and let my client know. I can't tell you what it is. We're not getting into details, but you are getting new information. So let's prepare for it. Let's talk about how, if you hear something challenging, what you might do with that. It is so helpful to know, okay, if this is really hard, right? My therapist is watching me. She may ask me if I need to take a break. I can ask for a break. And then as soon as we take a break, I know exactly what we're going to do to help me regulate. As a therapist, that's one of my roles there, is to help my client regulate, to keep them in their body, to keep them fully present. If they're dysregulated, to calm their system down. So your therapist is there to support you through all of that. But if at any time, right, I've never had to do this, but I know that it's an option. If we need to, we can do it over a couple of sessions. Okay. So then the next thing to keep in mind is that your post-disclosure care begins before you even leave the session. So you've got to debrief that session with your therapist. It's very important. You don't just finish disclosure and leave. Make sure your therapist sits down with you, that they assist you with grounding, that you talk through some things, that you have clarity on what the self-care plan is moving forward. I like to follow up with my clients within 24 hours and check in, knowing that you can reach out to your therapist at any time, if that's what they allow you to do, who are you going to reach out to if you're really struggling. Just know that it's really important before you get in your car to leave that you're fully grounded. So make sure that you feel like you're not in that high state of activation any longer, that you are feeling like, okay, I'm back in my body, I'm grounded, it's safe to drive. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Okay. So then as soon as you leave the session, you're going to begin your aftercare. So do it as soon as possible. Please know that you're going to feel emotionally raw. It's really interesting though, because sometimes I will hear betrayed partners say, I actually feel relief right now. I just feel like I finally know. And that's a great place to be. And we're going to talk about how that can shift and change a little bit too. Like I mentioned, you'll leave in separate vehicles, and then determine in your safety plan, are you going to stay apart 24 hours, 48 hours? How many days do you anticipate? Who are you going to call first? Who are you going to reach out to? Do you have support people that you're reporting to? If you're meeting up with people, where are you going to go to meet up? Also, think about, how am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to eat? Do I have places I'm going to go eat? Do I have food at home in the fridge? Am I drinking? Drinking water is so important. So really identify all of those activities you're going to do. Another thing is to really practice self-compassion. Now, this is for both the betrayed partner and the addict partner, because disclosure is so difficult. But shame can come up. You might even say to yourself, I can't believe I didn't see any of this. I'm just so stupid. I can't believe that, this is actually my life. How could I let this happen? Those are the moments where you have to step in with self-compassion and recognize that, you know what? You had no idea this was going on. Anybody in your situation would feel the same way you do, and to be very kind and speak kindly to yourself. Trust your instincts and your intuition. If it tells you to do certain things like take a nap, then take a nap. If it tells you you need to spend another day away and separated and do self-care, then do that. Some partners want to be alone after disclosure. Some betrayed partners want to spend it with support people. And there are some who prefer to even spend post-disclosure with their partner. There is no right or wrong way on that. What we determine it by is what is going to allow you to stay regulated. Can you be with your betraying partner, your addict partner, and still stay regulated? If you can, then that's great. I've had some clients even ask me permission. Is it okay if I talk to them afterwards? Well, absolutely, yes. It's okay. Well, can I meet up with them because I feel I want some connection? Yes, you can do that. I just would recommend that you put some boundaries around what you're going to talk about. We don't want to get back into all the details of the disclosure and all the questions. We want a framework around that. Your therapist will guide you on that. So that's going to be one of the hardest things because you're going to want to go in and ask a lot of questions. My recommendation is that you do that. You need to process more with your therapists. You might even need to go in and meet with your couples therapist or with one of the individual therapists to start going through some of those things. So those few days and even weeks post formal therapeutic disclosure, let's talk about what's going to take place. You need to be as gentle with yourself as possible. Remember, I told you you might have that immediate sense of relief, like, oh, I finally know the truth. And for the first time, both partners are living in the same reality together. However, what happens shortly after disclosure is that's replaced by a lot of traumatic feelings sometimes. Sometimes I see partners will have memories that come flashback. They might even have images come up in their head of something they heard. They might find that they're having more difficult time regulating. There might be a lot of sadness. And so they need to be prepared for the fact that they're going to really have to use their skills and tools and get the support they need. You're going to need to start processing what you've heard. So it's important, again, like I said, that you've got to work with somebody who's going to help you incorporate, what you thought your history was and what the reality is. So it might be really helpful for the betrayed partner. Sometimes they'll put together a mental timeline. I've even had some clients I work with where we actually have them do a written timeline so they can kind of make sense. And then we will go in and we will talk about grief and we will talk about gratitude and we'll talk about like processing that way. That's a great way to do it. Sometimes I've had therapists go, I can't remember what was shared. And while they don't get a copy of the disclosure document, I have a copy, and so I can go back and just read small segments to them so they can put the timeline together. Sometimes that's very, very helpful because you have so much information coming at you. Again, as a therapist, I am there to help the person understand the events, try to put the dates together, remember the data, okay? Don't be surprised, though, that if after you've learned the truth, that all of a sudden your relief also gets replaced by fear. I see this happen a lot. And the fear is, now I know everything. What if they go back into those same behaviors? And so then the betrayed partner goes into the fear cycle. Remember, with the fear cycle, we've got a couple different type of behaviors. The first type of behaviors are the control behaviors. So this is where all of a sudden immediately I see the betrayed partners putting together a list of boundaries, black and white boundaries, and we're going to put them in place right away. And you're going to do this right now. And now that I know the truth, right? I know the truth. And sometimes they even leverage that against the addict partner to get them to do things the way they want it done. So we have to be very careful with that, right? We've got to be flexible. We've got to talk, work it through in therapy to determine, okay, how can we do it in a way supports recovery, not black and white, all or nothing. Because remember, in recovery, sometimes the addict partner is going to have to drive down certain roads, right? Or, go to certain meetings or whatever it is that they're going to have to use their recovery skills and tools. And you, as a betrayed partner, are going to have to understand that that's part of their recovery. It's part of your recovery to be able to stay regulated while they do that. Another thing that I find that betrayed partners might want to do when they're in control and they're in their fear is they want to plan in place right away, immediately. This is the plan from here on out. And it's really overwhelming, especially for the partner in recovery. It's like they're still dealing with their shame and the rawness of going through sharing everything. And so sometimes it's very, very hard for them to hear all of that at once. So just recognize if you're in fear. If you're in fear, then address the fear. Ask yourself what you're afraid of. Identify that. The other thing that can happen is that you can go into some release behaviors. So the release behaviors are things like screaming and yelling and threatening harsh consequences. It could be saying you're going to divorce the partner because you've heard all those things and you're not waiting, for that agreed upon amount of time, like we talked about, to process everything. It could be a lack of personal self-care. It could be shutting down. It could be stopping your recovery work and not going back and seeing your therapist. So if you can recognize it as fear, work with your therapist and address the fear, okay? And then the weeks after disclosure, this is where work really begins. So you've got to continue honoring your agreed upon safety boundaries, but the also thing you've got to do is continue to manage your body and your emotions. But for a betrayed partner, it might be time to even go in and do a little bit of trauma work. So like I mentioned before, sometimes I will have betrayed partners who will have kind of images come up in their mind of something they can kind of imagine happened as their partner's acting out behavior. So I will do something called accelerated resolution therapy with them, which is a processing technique that helps us get rid of those types of images. And partners, it's been very successful with that. Sometimes we might do some EMDR on things. And again, you've got to be grounded and regulated enough to do that, but it's okay to start processing some of that trauma right away. I have found that to be very, very helpful for betrayed partners. The next thing you're going to do is, as a betrayed partner, you've got to start working on your impact letter. This is part of the processing. And in that, you're going to put together a letter that you will read in session to your betraying partner, to the addict partner. And so it does take several weeks. Your therapist will guide you on this. I give kind of a format, some forms to my clients to fill out. So you start to do an inventory of evaluating the actual disclosure, what that was like for you. What are the consequences to you? Why is there self-blame? What's the impact on your relationship? What boundaries are you going to be putting into place moving forward to create safety? And all the while you're doing that, you're looking at all of the lies, the deception, you're looking at the gaslighting, you're listening to everything you heard. And in that process, you're putting together, here's how I was impacted. And then, like I said, you're writing it in letter form. I will have clients come in and read their letter to me. And sometimes it takes us, 2 sessions, 3 sessions to get the impact letter completed. And then they bring in their addict partner and we read it, and it can be a very, very connecting, very healing experience. So that's the real important second part of a formal therapeutic disclosure. Your therapist, like I said, should provide you for information and guidance on how to do that. The next thing that's really important is that the third part of formal therapeutic disclosure is the addict partner putting together the restitution letter, that accountability letter based on what you shared. Now, I give my clients the option, would you like to share and give your partner your impact letter so they have it, so they can go back and read it again, so that they can actually address certain things in their restitution letter. So that is something that you can choose to do. It's going to take them several weeks to kind of put together that restitution letter. So timeline wise, I like to do impact letter within about a month, post disclosure if we can, 4 or 5 weeks. And then it's going to take a few weeks to do the restitution letter. So in that time, continuing to go to your therapist is really recommended. Also, starting couples therapy is a good idea at that time. So you might be able to back off a little bit from your individual therapy and then start putting in couples therapy in there. Your couples therapist can even be the one that guides you on doing the impact letter, the reading of it. The couples therapist can also help you with the restitution letter. But it's very, very important that you begin that plan right away with the help of a couples therapist in rebuilding trust, because there's so much involved in that, right? It's about learning empathy. It's about, being able to open up and be honest and truthful and transparent and having good communication. So there's still a lot of work to do. But the beautiful thing is I see couples work through all of that. And when they get to that point and they're working in couples, they're in a relationship that they don't recognize. It is so much better than it's ever been before. And that is the goal and the hope. It really is. So in conclusion, let's talk about what happens if you didn't get disclosure. What do you do? Because many people want that. Well, my recommendation is you go through and you do the impact letter. Have your therapist work with you on that. Go through and with what you know, address all the ways that it's impacted you. Maybe even do a timeline and work through your grief, your loss timeline. Talk about the consequences, and then go back and look at, okay, during those times, what were the points of gratitude? What was good in my life, so we can work on post-traumatic growth. There are ways to process your trauma. There's ways to actually help you heal, even if you don't get that formal therapeutic disclosure. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I tried to share with you some of the things that I see happening and some of the things that will really help you get through disclosure in a less traumatic way, and will also guarantee you having a really, really good outcome.
And this is so great. But you and I both know sticking points. So, like doing it faster or and it's I don't want to use incorrectly, but not optimally. Let's use that. It does more damage than good. And there is such a push sometimes, for the partner, like you said, I need to know, because then I'm going to be okay, which is, I know that that's what the brain is saying, but that's not the reality. And then the addict's going, well, and I'm going to use he and she pronouns, but she said she wanted to know, and then they're getting all of this stuff that just is more traumatizing. So for me, it seems like the biggest factor is being willing to take the pause and do the work. Like all of the stuff that you outlined is like, that does take real time, and if you're trying to, I just had discovery and now in 2 weeks I want to do a formal therapeutic disclosure, like, it can't possibly go well. And, and then a perceived failure of the formal therapeutic disclosure, rather than we didn't do the process. It was more, we, cobbled things together. So, like holding the space for particularly the partner, but I think both parties are uncomfortable. So holding the space for, trust the process, do this work, get the support. I mean, like, even you're talking about what are you going to wear to formal therapeutic. I mean, like, and I was like, that's really important. I know sometimes people have a different room in there. Like if you're doing it in person, you have a different room. So going and being in the room, like if you're always in this individual room and now we're going to be in a group room, going and visiting the room so that you have the visual of the space,
Yeah.
But I was thinking too, when you're talking about, all of this, what are they looking to get out of formal therapeutic disclosure? And I think that's done and we can move on. So even having the framework of this is just the beginning, this is a foundation, and we can move forward. But I'm not going to have complete and total honesty. I'm not going to have a spouse who is completely empathetic and understands all of this, and and has remorse for everything that they do. I mean, like, that is unrealistic expectation. So getting the framework of what really is a realistic expectation for formal therapeutic disclosure, why it's so important, how healing it is if you do it right. I love the adult sleepover. I was like, oh, and I was not everybody, but like when we do our empowered women's retreat, you know, it's like the bonding that happens in that, it's just so amazing, and it feels, you know, like the feel good feelings of, you know, those connections. So I thought of that. um you were talking about driving, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I can imagine how dysregulated somebody is after coming out of a formal therapeutic disclosure, even if they're feeling relief. It could be the, oh, I'm so relieved and like almost too relaxed to drive. So I was thinking how important it is to really have a plan and being intentional about how are you going to get from this point to where you're going, you know, safely, you know, just like all of these little, they're the little things, but all together they put a plan, you know. And also everything you're talking about is creating, you know, if this is an unknown, you're taking away a lot of those unknowns. So yeah, what the content is going to be some unknown, but the environment and how you're going to be nurtured and what you're going to do afterwards, all of those things are, you know, are a plan so that there's less unknowns, you know, as part of that. So yeah, when you're talking about the boundaries of not digging into the formal therapeutic disclosure, because I was like, oh sure, I feel relief, and then I go home and I'm thinking, but he said that, what does he really mean by that, and what, you know, like, and how to like really process through and not get caught in a loop, you know, on that. And I think what you're talking about is like, yeah, I'm going to meet with my client within 24 hours just to check in, you know, but I bet you do some prep work even with them before formal therapeutic disclosure, like if this is happening. So I've got a couple more things, but what would you like, that one feels really key, of like getting caught on a loop, you know, of something I heard, or what did they really mean, or did I hear that right? Because you also said the partners don't get a copy of that. We can talk about things, but they're not going to get a copy of the formal therapeutic disclosure. So what do you recommend for that?
What I recommend for that is, yes, it's okay to go back and ask for details, but there's got to be, I think, some parameters put into place, like we've talked about. One of them is that we've got to make sure we're well fed and we are well rested, that we're not doing it in a state of heightened emotion, right? I've got to be very grounded. My recommendation is, if you are the betrayed partner, let's write it down. Write down the questions that you have, right? Because even writing regulates. And you can use this even at any time, not just after a formal therapeutic disclosure. My recommendation, even use if you have to go ask a hard question, you know, of your addict partner, and then allow yourself some space to write down the answer. Again, it's going to help you stay regulated. So go back and say, okay, I'm very confused because I'm trying to make sense of everything, and I just can't get my thoughts off of this. So I'm wanting to know, you shared that, you know, this happened in 2019, right? Was this when we were living at this house or this house, right? Sometimes we need to know that. Some of the things that you want to stay away of would be some of the specifics of the acting out behaviors that are not going to help you heal. So it could be just really specific things, like maybe there was certain, you know, behaviors, that sexual behaviors that maybe are sexual behaviors that are part of your sexual intimacy. You know, we don't want to go there because it's going to create triggers in the future. So we've got to be careful that we're asking wise questions. And so if it's like you said, you fantasize, I want to know every name of every woman that you ever fantasized about, that's not going to help you heal, because then your brain's going to go down every list and who they are and how now we have to avoid them, and you're in the fear cycle. They'll never be a part of our lives again. We're going to cut them out, right? And we're down the rabbit hole. So we have to be very careful. It's okay to go back and ask questions as long as you put some of those boundaries around it. We do it well fed, well rested. I go in with the questions written down, write down the answers. If at any time either one of you get dysregulated, we call the timeout. We take a break. We come back together. We try to resume the conversation. If we can't do it then we put a pause on it until we get into the therapist's office and we talk about it there. So
Yeah.
that would be my recommendation. Any
Yeah.
other thoughts on that?
Well, no, I was thinking writing it down because, like, if I put it on paper, then I don't have to have it, going back and forth in my brain, oh, it's down here. And, if I'm intentional about it, I'm writing it down here so I don't have to loop it in my head, that could help. And I think it's really, if it's something we can resolve together, if it, okay. But we both agree that if there's something that's going to be problematic that we need to pick through differently than doing it with the care of a with a qualified professional to help us. I mean, like, if
Yeah.
the goal is how do we navigate this so that we both come out the other side and we can move forward in a healthy, healing way, then then the urgency of, like, I need to know now, can be replaced by,
Yes.
I need the best result. I want to make sure that we're doing what's going to be the most caring and helpful.
So one of the things that I will have partners even do is even just present, right, to the addict partner, here's the information I need to know, right? I'm going to just present it to you. Here's what it is. I want you to think about it. So give them an opportunity and then let's get back together and let's talk about it. So sometimes even giving them a little time to put it together, like, hey, I need you to go back and talk about 2020 and go through kind of everything in your disclosure. An addict partner could pull out the disclosure and read, everything that happened in 2020 to them in that moment. And the important thing is that we're asking the right kind of questions and we're both staying regulated. And like you said, the end result is it's helpful, is we're still connected, right? And we're able to then move on, right? It's helping us to continue moving forward in our progress and in our healing.
So the next question, it feels like there's some misperceptions about, what was said, because who is responsible for making sure an addict is completely honest? A polygraph before or after? I will comment on that in a moment. Why would you
Mhm.
allow why would you allow a traumatized partner to put themselves in two half truths? I think what you want to know is your prerogative, not the therapist. It's not their life nor the therapist. You don't have to do any of this. All of this is, like, if
Yeah.
you are looking to have an optimized formal therapeutic disclosure, and polygraphs are measures of stress, not truth. So I will post the American Psychological Association, did an article, their American Psychological Association, about the truth about lie detectors. So I will post that for you. You get to pick. Everybody gets to pick, and many partners do want, like, I want the truth, and I want, it's not about half truths. Like, if you're looking to have a foundation for healing, to me, it's up to the addict to show up honestly if what they want is to move forward, in the relationship. But I will post this article. But what are your thoughts? I mean,
Well, a couple of things. I make sure that I make sure that if I'm working with a betrayed partner and we know we've got formal therapeutic disclosure, and we're at that stage where it's fairly early on and we need to find a good therapist for the addict partner. I know therapists that are going to do a really good job in getting the addict partner to put the truth into the disclosure, that they are challenging, that they understand recovery. And in fact, I had a therapist just joke with me this week and say, I would like you just to send me something simple. What is this? Because I keep sending him the hard things because I say, you are so good. You took somebody who shared one thing and there were 50 things to share, and you got all 50 things in that disclosure. So much of making sure that the addict is honest really is that you've got to find a challenging therapist, somebody who makes them understand the importance of that being part of their recovery and what it entails, and helps them work with the shame and push through the denial and all of that. Because you're right, it's very damaging and traumatizing for a betrayed partner to only have half truths. But your chance of getting the full truth is far greater if you've got qualified therapists who understand how to put together a disclosure. And I know as a therapist, I've had situations where I've gone to the other therapist and say, I don't think we should be doing disclosure. I don't feel like the addict partner is in a place of complete honesty. I don't want to put my partner through, right? A disclosure, because I don't think they're in a place where they're telling the truth. And here's why. And I'll go through different behaviors. And so if I'm working with a really good therapist, they'll go, yeah, you're right. They're not in a place yet to be completely honest. Then I won't do it. As far as the therapist, what you need to know, let's talk about that. When clients come into me, it's really not me telling them what they get to ask or not asked. What it is I have them come in and say, here's what I want to know. And what I do is I help them formulate the best way to get the answer that they're looking for. So I will work with them on trying to kind of take and kind of pull it out and separate it a little bit and go, okay, what is the bottom line? What do you need to know? Well, I just need to know that they haven't fantasized about this person. Okay. And so it's like, we're going to figure out how to ask the question so it's in the healthiest way possible. There is never any time where I've ever said to a partner, you can't ask that. What I have said is we need to take that and we need to word it in the healthiest way. So you're getting the information you want that's going to help you heal. So I do a lot of education before we even get into questions. I give a lot of guidelines. And so when my clients come to me with questions, their questions are really good. I have never once ever X'd out a complete question. I have said, oh, let's think that through. Can we reword that? What is it you're really wanting to know? So, but you're right. You have a right as a betrayed partner to know the truth. And as a therapist, I'm not going to be the one who tells you, what truth you can and cannot know, or what you can and cannot ask. I see my role is I'm here to guide you on how to ask it in the healthiest way so you end up with the information you want. Now, how can you be sure if an addict is completely honest? The bottom line is time. Consistent recovery, transparency, openness, over time. Right. And that's how you know. And it's unfortunate because after formal therapeutic disclosure, there's still so much work to do. It's just the beginning. That's what we always talk about. This is the beginning. This is where we are finally turning over all the cards. We're putting everything out on the table. We're creating an equal playing field. And then we're going to start repairing from there. And there's differing opinions on polygraphs and, they're all over the board. And so I would just say that something that you work with your therapist, you go internal, you decide. But the bottom line is, I always say if an addict is going to act out, they're going to act out, no matter how honest they're acting or how honest you think they are. The truth is, are they really doing recovery? And how do you know it's that consistent recovery over time and you're seeing them do, you're seeing congruency in what they say and what they do. That's another way, they're honest. Any other thoughts, Tammy?
Well, I do because, and I know you've had this too, where, people, trade partners are planning for the formal therapeutic disclosure, but the addict is still acting out, and like that's not the point. Like you will keep having more disclosures because, but just like you said, and then, that's where the repair begins. But, until and unless the person has tools to use and this is another event. And so therefore, I'm not making any excuses, but, Dr. Rob has talked about, somebody could do a formal therapeutic disclosure, pass a polygraph and go act out. That's not the point of any of this. The point of this is that you're setting up, a path forward. And like you said, you can have a relationship that you couldn't have even imagined if you're doing the work. But I think they're a better lie detector than, a polygraph measures stress. It doesn't measure truth. And like Debbie said, there's no protocol. We keep asking, I keep begging for it. If these are so great, tell me what the protocol is and how do you make sure that this is somebody that works, in the mental health field. And, there are certain people, and Debbie is one of them, that has someone she uses and she uses it in a certain way and all of that kind of stuff. But lots of them, there aren't. They're just people that do some polygraphs and there's no protocol and there's no efficacy test and there's no research on when you do it or whatever. So if you're looking for the truth, Dr. Rob and I read You Can't Lie to Me. I've got the book over here. You partners are a better lie detector than a polygraph. And you will know by their actions, and again, over time, because you guys figure this out. You find it, you know what you're looking for. So, but that's not the point. The point is, if you guys are moving forward, and to heal the relationship, then the addict is going to show up with, and take accountability for their actions, for their behaviors and what it has done. When Debbie's talking about the restitution letter, it's like, wow, I'm sharing, this is the stuff. You're telling me how it's impacted you, and I'm telling you how I'm going to take responsibility for those actions. And then guess what? We have shifted. We've got a solid foundation, and we can move forward in a different way. If you're and I hear this from lots of partners. I just need to know. I need to know all of the stuff, and then I'm going to be okay. No, probably not. You will probably be more dysregulated because there isn't. That isn't healing. That's just more trauma, particularly if it's not done in a safe and supported environment. So, like we care so much about having good results, but guess what? You guys get to pick. Like we have our lives. We're doing fine, and we care deeply about helping other people, but everybody gets to pick their journey, and some are going to do the do-it-yourself. I'm going to tell you everything, and I want to know all the gory details, and then the poor traumatized partners are going like, I can't get this out of my head. I'm sorry.
Well, I like what you've said, because I do believe intuition's a really important part of this and knowing the truth. And so one of the things I do work with my clients on at some point is we work back on strengthening intuition, right? And going back and recognizing when your intuition was very accurate, even though you're gaslit, right? And how your intuition shows up. Because honestly, you're going to sense it. You're going to feel it, know it. You're going to notice the subtleties that aren't making sense. You're going to get those feelings that, oh, something's off here. And so to learn to really trust that and follow through on that is one of the greatest tools you have as a betrayed partner. And so I know that there's this question of, and I hear this all the time from my partners, will I ever know the truth? Will I ever really get the full truth? I still feel like there's something there, and there could be. And I don't know. I know that sometimes addict partners, the way their brains work, the information comes out later. They start to have recall depending on where they're at in their recovery. And so we have the agreement that when new information and data comes up that the addict partner remembers, they have between 12 and 24 hours, depending on your boundary, to sit down and share that. Here's the new data that came up. Here's the memory. I want to make you aware of it. So I like couples to have a plan for that, so that anytime new information comes up, the addict's not holding on to it. They're going to share it with you. So we're having ongoing honesty. And honesty doesn't just show up with sharing with you all the acting out things from the past. Honesty also shows up in daily life, in them showing up honestly and truthfully and saying to you, hey, I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock, and they come in at 6 o'clock on the dot. Those are the things. Or I'm going to take the trash out, and they take the trash out. Believe it or not, those are two things that I have had show up a lot, those two examples. And so honesty is, there's so many aspects to it, right? And yeah, for some people, it's like, I want to know everything, and I want to know it all. And we do our best. We really do our best in a formal therapeutic disclosure to try to get you all of that information.
And I mean, there's so many opinions out there, and I think it's really, what do you, and working with your qualified professional, what do you need to know in order to be able to move forward, in a healthy way, and like it was bad, like it was bad, and there would be certain things that you absolutely need to know, like if it was an affair with your best friend. Oh my gosh, you absolutely need. I mean, there are certain things that you absolutely need to know. If it was in your house, whatever. There are certain aspects that are absolute need to know. And but it's it like all of the data can be overwhelming. Have it be categories and information. Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is, am I showing up differently, looking to move forward in a different way? Because if you've got a really reluctant addict who's, dragging their feet and you're concerned about half truths, that's a lot of information for you as a betrayed partner. And like, I love what Debbie was talking about. you didn't get a formal therapeutic disclosure, it doesn't mean you can't heal. Like, I was thinking when you're talking about the impact letter, you're probably working on that with a qualified professional. Now, it can be death, it can be divorce, it can be an addict who you stay with, who is not ever going to get into recovery. Well, maybe, there's a snowball's chance, but is not actively moving towards that now. That does not mean you can't process through, and move forward in a different direction. So, it's such an individualized journey. All we're trying to do is give you some opportunities and options, for tools to use along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, the goal is not to re-traumatize or add more trauma to the betrayed partner's experience. It's already hard enough. It is. And so, I mean, I put that out there in the very beginning of working with somebody on a formal therapeutic disclosure is I want to make this a healing experience. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it if we can put all of the safety things in place, right? And do the very best. The unfortunate thing is that we can't control the addict. We don't know exactly what they're going to do, right? We can get you prepared as a betrayed partner the best we can possibly do. So we can never guarantee an outcome. We can put things into place to give you the best chance of having a positive outcome. And that's really what I work hard with my partners to hopefully accomplish.
But we can't control anybody else. Like, I mean, like, it's not just the addict. It's like we have zero control over anyone else. What we can do, Debbie does amazing work with boundaries, and the healthy boundaries are for my safety. That's the only thing I have any, a modicum of control over is how I show up for me, and making sure that I'm doing the best that I can to, hold my. We were talking earlier about self-care, and my self-care has been kind of sucking lately. And so I'm like, I am going to commit to this weekend working on that harder, I mean, but it's like, I have control over that and I'm not doing a great job. But we can, we can work on ourselves, and we can put things in place to invite others into our, into our world and in a safe way. But it's up to us to monitor, is this working for me? So. Okay, so now watch the schedule, because around the 4th of July, so July 5th, we will not be here. And so I'll watch the schedule. It'll be off a little bit for July, but thank you, as always, great information. Thank you all for, joining us, and the recording will be posted on our website. Lots of resources, please check them out. For partners, we do this from a pro-dependent lens. We do not use codependent language. We do not pathologize partners for caring about people who have brokenness. We care about you both, and we want healing. It's a journey. So thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.